Hello and welcome to How Would You Make a Bard in Animite Tales. If you're watching this and are very confused, the lovely Sam has been replaced with a hand that shines its glorious power within all of us. And by that I mean Kane.
Yes, the light of the spare guest.
The light of the spare guest.
We could actually talk to the hand today.
Absolutely.
I've always wanted to.
A bit of backstory on this one. We didn't know really what to do for this episode, so we're going to do a D&D class in a not D&D game, just like the campaign that we did, the Animite Fables. Cut short due to some issues, a couple narratively and another couple schedulally, due to a couple of people leaving. But we're going to see how you could make the classic bard from D&D in Animite Tales. This won't be massively and totally 100% accurate, because obviously it's a different system. But for just a rundown for any of you who have suddenly skipped to this episode, Animite Tales is a system based on superpowers, not on magic. With that being said, we're going to basically come up with 3 different possible character ideas and builds, and see exactly how roughly you would be able to make this bard in Animite Tales. Does anyone want to start this off, or how should we go about this?
I'm just going to go with the obvious one. I'm just thinking we should start it off with sound manipulation.
Yeah,
first and foremost. And this is the thing, because Kane already brought this up before we started recording. Like, you have to have a lot of different abilities to get the full bard power. But if you want to have a basic bard character with what you would consider a bard, you'd have to have sound manipulation. So you'd be able to do some incredible damage with sound, and be able to do some extra things with sound as well. And you'd have that paired with performance. And we'd have something very similar to what Bartholomew T-Bones had. Is it T-Bones or B-Bones? I can't remember. But
I think it's Bartholomew B-Bones.
Yeah, B-Bones, yeah. Basically, because with Bartholomew, he was probably the closest thing we had to a bard, in terms of what he did.
I have gone on record to say that, yeah, he's definitely the closest thing to a bard we've actually ever had in any of this game's system, but also in any of my games that I've ever narrated.
And it's just, including the personality as well, just being a hell of a laugh. But that aside, it's that most of the spells that you'd find for bards in D&D, Bartholomew already had in performance. Being able to put people to sleep, being able to pump people up and give them buffs. Being able to debuff people, or and to do damage to people as well. So he had it purely on performance alone. But I think if you want to give that an extra boost, it would have to be with sound manipulation, just enhance those skills as it is, and do more sort of magic-y type things. That's my 2 cents on it. I also had a whole thing of a good power to be paired with it. I think would be energy manipulation. Which would so you can make constructs with it. So you could just sort of mimic,
So you could do the Big B's hand thing from Vox Machina, where you just generate a giant light hand to do the Big B's hand thing.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So, it wouldn't be perfect, but it would mimic it pretty reasonably, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one. I mean, I had a couple of ideas for something like this, especially with sound manipulation, because you can have an ability called To the Beat, which is an ability where when you hit someone with a melee attack, you can actually do it where you can amplify the sound of you punching them, therefore adding sonic damage to your strikes. You can also do it where you can imbue an object with sound manipulation or sound amplification, meaning that when sound plays from it, it then amplifies its damage output passively after it's been affected. only lasts once for one turn, but it's still a really useful thing if you want to give someone else a musical object. Or even
I
something
like
that
that a
generates
lot.
sound. Oh yeah,
You
especially
can
because you
definitely
can
do the
also
whole. Yeah.
you can literally cast silence on an area, which means that you can also then do the bard thing of like, I'm going to cast a specific spell, which affects other people from being able to do things. So those are just some of the abilities. You can also do stuff like full sound dominion, which allows you to actually sense anything to do with sound vibrations, and it also allows you to actually amplify sound outside of the area of what you're playing, which means that you could also turn up other people's music, which is just crazy. Yeah, that's mental things for that. Kane, do you want me to go first, or would you prefer to go first?
I don't mind.
No, go on.
I was just looking at the husks to see what you do power wise. You were doing a bard.
Okay. So you're going to go really interesting. I'll give you some more time, then I'll talk about my one. Originally, I was going to say something really basic like Catalyst, which allows you to play other people's abilities through different instruments. So you could have like a guitar that has, say for instance, a biokinetics blood infused into the wood or into the strings, so that when you play this guitar, you then activate your Catalyst abilities, and then boosh, I can now heal people by my songs. And having that whole thing of each instrument has different, I guess, genres of powers, giving you that sort of utility, multiplicity within utility. But I actually do kind of like the idea or the aspect of, weirdly enough, going through, what's it called? Again, sort of performance and ability learning under copying, because bards seem to be able to gain the abilities of other classes. Like they can have a cure wounds spell, they can have an ability where they can cast mage hand, they can do stuff through other means like hexes, and they can cast silence or counterspell. And so on and so forth. They can do certain things like that. Now, I know in the Legends of Vox Machina, there's a couple of times where he casts spells that almost seem like as if he's copying what people do and then just making up a song that can basically allow him to do the spell. I know that's not really necessarily how it works in D&D, but you can do certain abilities that allow you to gain access to other different classes, spells. With that being said, I think copying and ability learning would be great. You see someone do something, you can store it up into your powers, and you can then cast that ability, which I think would just be great. Because you could even do stuff like, oh, I'm going to copy this person's polymorphism ability, and then later on you just go, and now I cast it, and I'm now going to transform into a giant dragon, or now I'm going to cast this ability, and now I have super strength temporarily, or something. Even having it that maybe you have a usage style where you roll for your powers and then you roll for your performance, and you can then like cast it on someone else. Like, and now with the strength of 10,000 men, it will go all to that of thee. I call you Sven, and then I don't know, the guy who's called Sven just suddenly gets super strength.
I'm just sorry. It would be so terrible if nobody in the group's name like rhymed. So just
with
some
anything.
guy called Sven, millions of miles away, gets these powers, and they're like, "Oh yeah."
Well, I guess one of the downsides you could have is it has to be someone within earshot of the actual song. But yeah, as for performance, you could always have it that like the bardic inspiration ability could be based on a D4. And then having it that like it's a, because I actually thought of this. You could do it based on the whole system of like damage, where it's like it's a D4 plus 1 dice up for every level, but that would mean that you could do 2D12s of it. So I just thought, no, instead 1D4 plus 1 dice up for every 3 levels, and it starts at level 1. So it means that then like only after 3 levels after level 1, so it'd then be at level 4, you can then do a D6. At levels 6 or 7, you can then do a D8, and then at like level 9 or level 10, you can then do a D10. And whatever that lands on, it then is added to anyone's d20 rolls, which could be really nice to have that sort of inspiration ability. Could there be something else? Possibly. I mean, you could always just have it that it is just straight up a specific dice, and then maybe you can't upgrade it, but instead you have to get a better ability later for it. So it's like, okay, I've got a pure technique, where now I roll something higher, or something. At that point, that's really down to narration as to whether or not you'd be allowed to. But yes, we do actually have the proficiency of musical instrument, where you can do sonic damage, you can do inspiration-like stuff, where you can grant someone an advantage roll, which arguably isn't as great as inspiration from D&D, but to be fair, our system works a little differently. And we also have the abilities to put people in a trance, pull aggro, and even remove aggro, and trick people. And so on and so forth. There's all sorts of different ones that you can do. Personally, my favourite one that we ever had was obviously the lullaby one, which Bartholomew used a lot to put people to sleep.
It's so funny. Fantastic.
Kane, what about yourself?
Alright. Surprisingly for husks, it's pretty damn difficult. I guess I should explain what husk is for people who don't know what they are. It's essentially a race that was previously human that has been mutated by Animite, this form of radiation that exists in this world, and mutated to the point where they are no longer considered human. Thus, their abilities are semi-simpler, but they get 3 of them, so they stack quite a bit. But just trying to figure out which ones go together for a bardic build is kind of difficult. I'm thinking for archlings and demons for their stuff. I think for their combative based power, elemental breath would be quite interesting. Especially,
yeah,
especially if you get
for
away.
singing.
Yeah, especially if you get away with Sonic. If not, the best other one would probably be lightning.
Yes, yeah. I spit fire and I sing thunder.
Yeah, because you could do that, and then in terms of their defensive powers, I wasn't really sure. I was maybe thinking elemental stockpile.
Okay.
Because then
do
if
it
your
like
thing
Sonic.
is, yeah.
Ah.
And then you can empower yourself through your own music.
So cool.
I'm not entirely sure what you do with that then, but yeah, you could make yourself stronger through your own music.
I guess you can always further enhance any other ability that you're using, because it doesn't have to just be on superpowers, does it? Because it can be any ability.
I believe so. Yeah, so you could enhance your trade through your empowerment of your own music. And the other one is super charisma, or if you want to get really whack, you could do environmental symbiosis, and if you could get away with it, do concerts or something, or places where there has to be loud music.
Okay, so you could either become more powerful because other people are joining in, or even having it that it's just a very loud place full of festivities.
Yeah.
Even having it where it's if you're in a fighting situation where it's oh no, everyone's attacking us. I was like, don't worry, and then you roll to play a ripping chord, and it's everyone join forth, and suddenly starts playing a guitar solo, and everyone starts joining in, and it's just I don't know, suddenly it turns into a musical moment, sort of almost like one of the sort of dwarven songs from The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And it's and that's what Bilbo Baggins hates, as he just immediately brings down an axe onto a giant's head, and it's and the power depowers now, and it's that would be kind of an interesting thing of you basically have to get everyone to sing along before you can actually get this power boost, but when you do, everyone sings along, and you're and I don't wanna hear it again. Suddenly...
And for their mutation, they've got to have multi-hands. I mean...
Ooh, yes, so they can play either 4 separate instruments, depending on what the instruments are, or at least 2 if they are 2-handed instruments. Okay.
It
could be oh my god, you could actually have it so that, in the Pick of Destiny, you could have Cage's, spread-legged guitar, double guitar. You could have like just 2 of those at the same time.
Yeah, because that one's quite interesting. For wraiths, I found them even harder for shadows and wraiths. Because for their combative power, you could either have two. You could either have super decks, so you could play your instruments even better, or you could have Sonic Screech, which again would give you the Sonic-based abilities and amplify it even further. Or you could have Tendril Manipulation, so you could play a bunch of instruments at once.
I'd say that would be all entirely dependent on whether or not your that would all be entirely dependent on whether or not your DM would allow you to have it that your tendrils were good enough, because it's just one long tendril, so I don't know if they'd allow you to be able to have it.
Well,
that
it's
would work
it's 2, I believe, but yeah, I still.
But I do like what you're saying there. I think Sonic Screech would be great, because if you could somehow get it where you could actually do Sonic Screech through some like air instrument, where it's like, I'm going to use Sonic Screech through this trombone, and it just massively bellows. So it's like you could add your Sonic Screech damage to your trumpet, so you could actually deal damage whilst you're also like playing a song, and it's just basically the equivalent of like a megaphoned song or something.
Yeah, and I mean, for the defensive powers, they don't really have any ones that stack or like really work. Like you could either give them super wisdom or like self-softening. But again, these are just. I think defensive would be kind of just choose whatever, really.
I feel like
And it could work.
self-softening could work, especially if you ever wanted to do it where your character is if your character is actually a drummer. Like you could have it as like, I use self-soften on parts of my ligaments, so I can basically like do the drumming, and it's like, oh well, thanks to super dexterity and soft bones, I can basically hit them very quickly and very fast. So I can hit them very quickly and be able to like do it with very little like problem. And it's like, oh, well, thanks to the softening of my limbs, it's actually now easier to do so with as little drawback as possible. On top of that, you could also just have it that like, oh, well, self-softening is good for physical resistance, or even just similar to that whole concept of it's kind of a weird sort of wacky ability, and bards kind of are supposed to be a mix, a mix of weird wacky abilities, like a bag of weirdness.
Yeah, I think that would work. And then for their special ability, I think the best ones would either be invisibility or phasing. Basically, 2 abilities that help you get away from situations when you need to dip.
Yeah, that one's a difficult one, because either one works really well. I mean, with phasing, potentially you could argue to have like a dimension door like effect, as he was saying before, like dimension door is a spatial like spell. You could potentially argue that for level 10 when they get to that, but if not, you could always just have it again, invisibility, because again, invisibility grants you a couple of really unique effects. But one of the best ones is at level 10 you can choose to have a mutation evolution ability, which basically grants you immunity to energy damage whilst invisible, which is amazing.
It is pretty good. But yeah, I think in terms of their abilities, that would be most. I don't really remember what they get for mutations, because I know theirs is slightly different.
Yeah, their system works a little different. It's like they get one specific thing, or a buff, or they get to make it into an SPMA equivalent. Including like a master level SPMA at level 10.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about like the bonus mutation they get, because I think they get like claws, extended tongue. I don't remember
Claws,
what the
extended tongue, wings, extra arms.
Oh, okay, they get the extra arms to them.
Yeah, they get. The only difference is they don't get horns, and I think they don't get tails.
Yeah. Okay.
I know there was going to be something where claws were also going to be added with teeth at some point, but I don't know if we ever actually went through on that. To be fair, I actually quite like all 3 of these, because they're all 3 different possible bardic characters, and they work quite well. Before we actually go into how we'd make some of the different abilities from the bard's capabilities, we'll actually talk about stats. I'd argue that charisma is the first one and dexterity is the second one in terms of height.
I mean, yeah, those are the 2 obvious ones. Anyone who's made a bard character would be like, yes, these are the 2 things. And especially for our game, if we're going to do any of these builds, it would probably be charisma and dex.
I feel like in the terms of combat, you could do a weapon proficiency, but I feel like if you want to do the best, I'd say purely just going for a instrument proficiency. But again, that's me. What were you going to say?
I was going to say as well, possibly also strength as well. If you're going to do the whole like when you said, it's like if you're going to have like a weapons proficiency as well, because
I feel like I feel like I'd argue wisdom over strength personally.
With the creativity, I guess.
Not only that, but they know how to incite someone to then say the right things.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, like, they're supposed to be worldly people because they're supposed to be going... Like, often bards are usually similar to that of buskers. They travel around and they... Often, anyway, not all the time, but often they travel around and, they try to earn money through their musical exploits. But, I think intelligence would either be the lowest or the second lowest. Because I feel like con or strength would be the one that bites it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely con and maybe intelligence as well, because, I mean, not all bards are like, are like silly billies, but a lot of them are. It's just like, it's sort of like to the detriment of the other skills that they really need.
Because I would honestly argue that strength would probably be the lowest out of all of them, purely because they need to be strong enough to hold up their instruments. But honestly, instruments aren't that heavy, and if you get straps for them, they're even less difficult to deal with. And I just want to point out, like, how many guitarists, or at least specifically how many other type of musicians, are that great at manual labor. Like, yes, there might be some out there that are great at it, but that doesn't mean all. And again, that might not mean the majority, but the often term is led to believe that most people who are musicians, or at least specifically bards anyway in D&D, they're not often the strongest creatures.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. I will give you that. Although I do think that with my bard, if I'm playing it, I would like to at least be able to hit someone over the head with a guitar as a last resort. But that's just me.
I think that would be a really poor choice to do, but fair enough.
Depends how your guitar is built.
Yeah, fair enough. Which I'll get into that in a bit. Actually, we'll get to that. Abilities.
Should we go over? Well, I was gonna say also, should we go over possible trades they might have, excluding the obvious ones?
Oh well, since you bring it up, go for it.
Well, like we were saying, you're probably gonna have performance and then probably a couple of instruments as well. But I was trying to think. Obviously, other proficiencies you could have would probably end up lining into like the weapons ones. So they'd probably more be like dex weapons, so rapiers, blades, and etc. But you might also have, because obviously they're known as jack of all trades, so they tend to be able to be good at a lot of things, but not always the master at the craft. So I think, to be honest, you could probably go into almost any trade and make sense of it, depending on where your character's been. This is the wrong thing. No, that was the right thing. Never mind. So I'm just trying to open up tabs to look at the things.
Nah.
I've got a lot right now.
I do agree with you though. Like, if you wanted to go into something, yes, it does make sense to either go into like martial arts or a dex-based weaponry. I'd say either a dagger or, as you said, a rapier would probably be best.
Or you could just pull out some guns. That always works.
Yes, I mean, especially if you're in a modern sort of style, guns also work. I also quite like the idea of that, like, because I mean, especially if you want to finish off the whole rapper style thing, you could actually have it that, like, yeah, what's your instrument? Fool, I am my instrument, and then just having it that, like, you're just, I'm from the hood. Or even having it that like you're a singer, and the fact that it's like, oh yeah, no, my voice is my weapon, but then having it that like, oh, someone like tries to like attack you, and then suddenly you pull out a gun, fires it into them, and it's like, well, artistically, it's my weapon.
I mean, with the power of sound manipulation as well, you could imbue each bullet, or the gun itself with
an extra bit of sonic damage. Yeah.
So it's like, no, you could be like, MIA, say, all I want to do is and take your money. Like, but in real life.
I think would be good that isn't combat related is navigation. If you're a character who's going to be traveling quite a bit,
Ooh,
then obviously
yes.
knowing or getting your way around would also be good, and having, I don't know, driving or avionics, so you can either fly a plane or drive around.
Absolutely. Or, one particular one is, on top of this, you could also be a crafter, someone who actually crafts musical
Yeah, I was
instruments.
thinking tinkering would be quite good as well.
Yeah, you might also know a bit
that
of
goes
tech.
into pick locking and disarming traps and etc.
Yeah, like, I mean, if depending on the way that you go about it, like if you were going from the regular D&D bard thing, yes, tinkering and even crafting also helps. But yeah, often it's just usually like a small weapon proficiency, so that then like they can still fight back without their instrument. Not all of them can, obviously. But sometimes that's a choice that people make for their character. Like navigation is really quite good. In our system, like aviation, driving, crafting, and technology, for instance, you could drive cars or fly planes or helicopters or anything like that. Somehow, if you can get your hands on them.
Also getting other language proficiencies as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Having that could also help you, especially charismatically, being able to be diplomatic between different races. So having different languages, like speaking Huskonian or Aquarian. What else was there? There was another one that was actually really good that I thought of just now. The having it that your character might know a bit of, as you said, tinkering and crafting and survival and stuff like that. Specifically, I was thinking about adding navigation with crafting or survival, where like you sort of add them together. Although that, to be fair, that sort of falls more in the ranger territory.
I think chemistry could be a good one though.
Chemistry also could possibly be a good one, although that might arguably fall again into either druid or ranger. But actually, to be fair, it falls into that and rogue, so all four of those, technically, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely with bard anyway. Like you could do a lot of these different ones. Any that you can think of, Alex?
Actually, I'm all tapped out. Actually, for bard, I need some bardic inspiration.
I mean, I know
because I can't forget it.
I know, like in the pantheon that we have for Animite Tales, there's also like a god of music. So technically, you could also have an apostle and be sort of like a half cleric bard that also prays to the gods of music. Which could come in handy. But yeah, I'd say that's actually a pretty good fit. In the terms of it, I'm gonna say at least one of us each. No, each one of us has to come up with at least one specific ability from the bard, and we have to come up with at least how we think that we would build it or make it for our said characters, or just in general for a bard character in Animite Tales.
I've got one.
Okay.
I've got an idea now. Well, another anomaly type ability that I didn't really consider, but I've thought of now. What if we had like telepathy and a telepath or sound manipulation? I guess we could just have a telepathic, bard, and you could do one of my favorite spells, Vicious Mockery, where you could do psychic damage by basically giving basically like singing like really really terrible insults at people that cuts people to their core. Like you could do that with a charisma to get in there. You can have it as a kind of usage style where you use it as a charisma to actually get in their head, but also amplify it with your powers. So maybe you do more damage by that because you've actually cut them so deep, that it's weakened their mental defenses, so it does more psychic damage to them. It's like, oh, no, I'm owned.
If you were doing that as well, you could also do disguise self, because you could just make people think you look like someone else.
Yes, that's true.
See,
That's true.
I had an idea that you could actually do this with. It could be a usage style between your ability of performance and your ability of telepathy. Now, you can either do it with just performance, or you could do it with charisma. And you could roll taunt, or you could roll performance, and then you could roll SP. And it's just that the taunt enhances your ability, and therefore it does 1.5 times damage of psychic. And it could be to anyone who is insulted by this. So you could either cast it on multiple people because you go, you all suck, or if you have specific insults, it's like this particular thing. And even if your narrator was also open to the roleplay aspect, you could actually have it depending on how personal the insults are. They could maybe have to roll a disadvantage against it or an advantage against it if it just really didn't make any sense. So you could actually have it like, no, you have to come up with the insult, and then depending on the situation, I will roll disadvantage or advantage or just normal. So it's like, for instance, like, oh, you're a freakish ghoul and you shouldn't have existed. And it's like, well, actually, that really hurts this character. So yeah, they roll disadvantage. Or in another one, it's like, yes, you're right, but like, I kind of like that you know that, and I also agree. And if anything, that makes me want to be alive more. And it's like, this isn't going anywhere nearly as great as I thought.
But note to self, make that for Rakia.
Note to self, vicious mockery for next character. What about yourself, Kane? Any spells or abilities?
I was trying to think how I mean, obviously, Dimension Door, you could literally just either have spatial along with sound manipulation, or just have spatial and then do that. Or like you were saying before, possibly you might be able to get away with that with phasing, depending on how lenient your DM was with you making that sort of ability as your master skill.
I mean, with like sound manipulation, with the first evolution, it has like the Quake ability, where it also does, as well doing impact, it does do spatial and sonic as well. So you could have it that you do an SPMA where you take the spatial element of it and create something with that. Perhaps don't necessarily have to have spatial.
I mean,
it's true. It'd be kind of, you'd have to break space to be able to move around.
Again, it could be potentially possible, again, depending on how lenient. I mean, I think I'd allow something like that because obviously that's the damage type. Like Quake, it uses for sound vibrations and it breaks space itself. So you could potentially have an SPMA based around it because that kind of makes sense.
It's not so so it's a bit more janky version of spatial, where using it with your abilities, like Actually, that would be a good roleplay thing as well.
It
Where
would
it's
never
like,
be
you
a
can
stealthy
do it.
thing.
Yeah.
No,
No, definitely not a stealthy thing. But
I'll
then
try
again,
to roll stealth
screw
with it.
stealth.
The entirety of the dimension between this world and the next cracks and shatters. So it went stealthily, right?
No one knows that it's you, but everyone knows that it's happened.
I got a natural 20 on stealth. Oh, okay, so nobody sees you do it, but they know that it was you who did it.
Sam.
That does actually sound like something Sam would do. Love you, Sam, but yeah. Yeah, sorry, Kane. You were saying?
No, I think that would work. To be fair, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure what else. But yeah, I think that'd be quite interesting having a get go or escape spell or an escape SPMA where you could shatter space for a time and then get away. Although I guess it would have to be within your range of quake manipulation.
Yeah.
Or quake
Yeah.
generation.
I mean, either way, it could definitely work. You could actually do that. I mean, yeah, it really depends on that one. I was gonna say what was it? You could do a couple of different ones. In all honesty, you could have, as I said, like I'm gonna go with the copying one that I said with casting stuff like casting lightning bolt. Where it's like, oh, well, I've just, saved up the ability Lightning Bolt from this Electrokinetic who fired a Lightning Bolt at me. So, Lightning Bolt! And then suddenly shoots off, like, a Lightning Bolt. You could also have it that, like, certain abilities could actually, be quite tricky to use, obviously. But I'd say one of the cooler things that you could do is just have a usage style where it's just you're rolling your powers and you're rolling performance to activate any of your abilities. So long as obviously the requirements are no higher or no lower, no higher than 15, because obviously neither of them can be any higher than 15 on a usage style, but it could still work. You could make advanced techniques eventually where your music actually unlocks abilities, but it also combines it with some of your previous abilities of bardic power. So it's like, this does sonic damage, plus it also does lightning from the special copied ability that I've got. But more specifically, you could do the inspiration thing based on, as I said, either a dice. And I guess, as I said, the way that you could do it is, again, it only does a d4, or maybe it does a collection of d4s, or maybe, like, as I said, again, maybe it's like maybe the roll requirement increases it. So it's like, oh, this one is a 10 plus, so it's a d4. This one's a 15 plus, so it's a d6. This one is a 20 plus, so it's then a d8, and this one's a 25 plus, so it's now a d10. And, like, you've got those things where it just increases the dice each time. And then you can, play it, and then, boosh, I now give you this, and it adds that to any of your rolls for one roll. Which is possible. One particular thing that we do actually have in the Bard system is that when you get to level 5, I think it's called... oh my gosh, I think it's called... what is it? It's similar to... I think it's called Tradesman or Tradesperson. Where literally, like, basically the perk works the same way as Reactive Strike, where you can roll it instead of rolling the proficiency based around it. So often with singing or certain other musical instruments, it would be charisma, or with certain musical instruments, it'd be dexterity. Now, this albeit, I will say this did come about fairly recently in a discussion that I had with Bill, because we said trades that start with the ability is great, but having it that the modifier is based on the level before they get to level 5 means that it kind of makes the previous stats based around them redundant. It's like technology, medical, and let's say, for instance, technology, medical, chemistry, and botany. That could all be based on intelligence or wisdom. Driving and aviation could be based on intelligence, wisdom, or dexterity. crafting could be based on dexterity or wisdom. But, performance could be based on charisma or dexterity. Stuff like that. So having that would actually be quite interesting. By the way, that is such a new development that I don't think I've actually said it in front of you two. So this has just been something like a bomb that's been dropped.
Well, you just whoa, man.
Dude, you didn't have to. Jeez. But yes,
twisting my melon, man.
Twisted your melon, which this will obviously affect your characters moving forward. I mean, I know Rakia has survival, and that potentially could affect their survival, which I think is based on a wisdom roll at the moment. But yeah.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah.
To be honest, that's better for you, to be honest.
Yeah. I think, I don't think that it's going to be a detrimental thing at all.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's the only difference between the two is you can use that, and obviously it then means that powers don't really negatively affect it, but at the same time, it also means that on top of that, you can also what is it? It also means that you can use it for other stats. So, for instance, if someone asks you a question and it's a world knowledge thing, instead you can go, I'm going to roll survivalist because have I survived against anything like this before? Or does this sound like something that my survival skills would sort of help me with knowing? Like a common sense question based around your years of surviving. Or for instance, in this particular situation with Bard, someone just goes, you need to roll diplomacy. I've got tradesperson. Could I roll Bard? Could I roll performance with my guitar to try and see if I can sing them a song? And see if that will help instead of a diplomacy? Suddenly I just whip out my guitar and it's I will tell you in song. And sometimes that could work, or sometimes that could, disbenefit you. I got a 20. Ah, yes, you did get a 20. However, this guy gets advantage against you, so no.
This guy is
music. This guy is definitely can only lip read, and since he was singing it, it was like watching it in slow-mo.
So it didn't get the benefit of the metaphor. It's just just tell me. Just tell me how to get to Amarillo. My God.
But yes, this almost turned into a power podcast where we started talking about the different possibilities of how this works. I'd say that could work relatively quite well, to be fair. Either of them, all three of these. Are there any other ones? Any other famous abilities that we might be missing in this one?
Well, I'll tell you who we could ask. The listeners! Put it down in the comments, anything that we've missed.
Absolutely. If you think that we've missed anything, don't forget to tell us, because as we all know, the internet loves telling people who's right and who's wrong. So, in those comments, let us know. Did we miss anything? I'm sure we did. Or maybe we didn't.
Wasn't that smooth?
Yeah, wasn't that a smooth transaction? That has been how you would make a bard in Animite Tales. Remember, don't forget to subscribe to us. That was a terrible outro. And also, don't forget to @me at Animite Tales as I am on Twitter, and @Obscuricom as Alex is also on Twitter. You can bully one of the two of us. Tell us how badly we don't know bards. Thank you yet again, Kane, for guesting with us.
Why'd you have to put it like that? That's a...
Well, you call yourself
a guest.
You call yourself the guest, even though technically you've been in almost as many of these now as
it's the spare guess, but I don't think the action is called guessing or guessing. I can't even English. Guessing.
But either way, hopefully we will bring you some more content very soon. Thank you very much for listening, and take care.
Bye.
See ya.
Well, I guess ciao ciao for now.